Well, howdy, folks. This is the first time that I'm actually being roped in to do one of this webinars, so bear with me if I have some technical hiccups. When I was asked to do this, it was to talk about Basil Downy Mildew with keeping in mind that we are trying to provide some information to our growers. Just a little disclaimer here. I haven't done too much with Downy Mildew on basil since the couple of incidences that showed up in Texas. So the way that I'm going to approach this is I'm going to try and talk a little bit about the causal agent, tell you about the story that occurred in Texas, and basically give you a little bit of what is currently being done in Texas. There's a little bit of work, and beyond basically what's in the literature.
Dr. Ong, can I interrupt for a second? Can you speak louder?
Okay.
Just a little louder. Thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me better? I'm trying to put the volume up. Okay. So this is the outline that I will try and follow, and I'm very glad to see some folks that are on this webinar. And I'm trying to keep it short so we do have an extended time for a discussion or question and answer type situation. Moving on to give you some basic information about the causal agent, it is a water mole. You may have read some old places where it talks about it being a fungi or using fungicides for it, but technically it is considered a water mole, an oomycete. Name is Peronospora bellberi. Tynes, that's the person who actually figured out the genetics of it and basically at the taxonomic level realized that it's a unique species. The primary transmission of this pathogen is through seeds. So there has been quite a bit of chatter about how to detect this pathogen in seeds, and I'll go through it a little bit later. The conditions that it appeared to like, which is very similar with a lot of other water moles, is cool, wet, damp type conditions. What we do tend to notice, it seems to be a spring type problem in Texas when we do have cloudy days, when it's cooler, relatively speaking, in Texas, and high humidity. That's when we actually have this problem tremendously. Just to give you a frame of reference for the non-pathologists, other types of water moles that you might be familiar with are the Pythiums and the Phytophthora. Now let's move on to the story in Texas. As I mentioned, this is a springtime problem. The first incidence or report of it that we got at the Texas Plant Disease Diagnostic Lab was back in May of 2010, where we had a sample come in, and sure enough, it was Peronospora on basil. Did a little bit checking. This came from a nursery that was producing plants for sale, and found out that they actually ran into this problem a little bit sooner. How much sooner? I couldn't get a straight answer out of them, but I'm suspecting it's probably about March or April was when they first saw it. And to remind you too, in 2010, it was a relatively normal winter. We saw that problem again in 2011, and this time in a hydroponic greenhouse production where the herbs were grown for culinary purposes, and that showed up at a greenhouse that has been in operation for about 4 years or 5 years at that time. So they never had a problem till April of 2011. In terms of the type of losses, I tried to gather those type of information to try and get an impact on the economics. The situation in 2010, the losses was not shared. I can tell you that the following year, 2011, 2012, and so on, they did have incidences of this. They did send one more specimen into the clinic in 2011, and 2012 is just by me communicating with them. So I know they have learned to recognize the symptoms, and they have taken the approach of roguing plants entirely. So I don't know what the losses were, although I had heard rumors that at one point they were losing, they got rid of upwards of 50,000 plants in one of those years. In 2011, in that greenhouse production, hydroponic production system, when that happened, my advice to that operator was to shut down and clean out the greenhouse, which basically shut him down for about 4 to 6 weeks. And I think by his estimation, there was about $250,000 loss in that process. Sorry, that was not 2014, that was 2011. Interesting thing to note at that greenhouse, I do have a good relationship with that grower. By totally cleaning out the greenhouse, he managed to get rid of the problem for essentially that year and the following year, but then it showed up again last year towards the end of the season, so in the fall, which was kind of interesting. Just to show you a few photos about what I saw, and I'm going to tell the story more in terms of the hydroponic production that occurred in 2011. So I was basically called into a situation where the person was having basil that appeared to be not sellable, yellowing. And it appeared that most of his plants that were affected were closest to the cooling pads. He was initially seeing symptoms that were just slight mottling, yellowing, and that was a big concern for him because he can't sell that. This is one that was taken last year that they were looking at. So it started in that fashion. Now, this grower basically started their own seeds. And what was interesting in their observation as well as my follow-up with them was the seedlings remained clean as they started it in a different part of the facility. And then it was after moving it into the hydroponic plugs into the main greenhouse, that's where pretty much about 2 to 3 weeks after they had symptoms showing up. Back in 2011, I believe we also sent some seeds to Rob Wick at the University of Massachusetts to evaluate to make sure that his seeds was not contaminated. And I don't believe we heard anything back, so the assumption is the seeds were clean. The other fact that we did start some seeds here as well and did some grow out studies and not get any infection occurring suggests that the seeds were clean. So the big question there that the grower wanted to know was, where did it come from? It should also be interesting for me to note that the incidents in 2010 initially and also in 2011 all occurred around the San Antonio area. So one was actually on the west side or southwest side, and the other one was on the eastern side of the city. We did a quick look around the greenhouse to try and see if there might be basil or basil family type plants that may be growing as volunteers that could serve as an overwintering plant host. Couldn't find anything. However, what was interesting in that whole situation was this greenhouse facility was located in an area where the urban sprawl was encroaching. And apparently there was a new neighborhood that sprout up right across the facility a couple of years before in 2008, 2009. So it was a couple of years before we actually got a situation with downy mildew on the basil. So one of the working theories is it is entirely possible that there may have been a contaminated plant in the landscape from that neighborhood that may provide inoculum. Can't substantiate that, but it is a potential theory. Some additional photos here to go through. This yellowing and mottling is quite typical. A lot of times people will mistake that and think it's nutritional. So they may fertilize it, they may treat it. One interesting thing is you usually don't get recovery from fertilization of such plants. This is one that we pulled. I'm trying to remember whether this was one of the original plants or this was the one that we pulled last year. This is much further along. It's always good to flip the leaf over. And although I can't show you the fuzziness of it, but you can see it looks like somebody threw some dirt on it. So you do get that sort of fuzzy, dusty appearance. Closer up of it, this is what we tried to look for. This is just through somewhat a 60x, I would say about 300 to 400 magnification, looking for the sporangia, which is one of the ways that the downy mildew can be transmitted quite readily and quickly. So we look for those clusters. In the clinic, the microscope is our friend, and so we get images such as this, and if you were to just Google the web, you would find a lot of places that have pictures similar. We look for structures like the staghorn conidiophores and the sporangias to match up with the size of the described pathogen. So additional ones here and some close-up. So there are some quite distinct characteristics that would help us to identify that this pathogen. I want to show you a few pictures of the plants that we have in the greenhouse. Dr. Gu and myself were putting in some trials in a greenhouse here, and so we were discussing about how to get inoculum into this greenhouse. And while she planted those plants, and before we could actually go to this grower to get some infected plants, she calls me up one day and said, we have some symptoms. I wonder if it is downy mildew. And lo and behold, it is. And just about a month ago, I was talking to another friend who actually has a greenhouse operation in Brazos County, not too far from College Station. And she commented the fact that when they tried to do basil, particularly Genovese, it basically didn't work because it was just yellowing once the plants got some size to it. So they just don't grow it because it was not a successful crop for them. From that we get the sense that it is probably widespread here in Texas. Now I want to go a little bit about what's in literature and what's been talked about the pathogen. The host that has been listed are Basil, Coleus, Agastache, I think that's how you pronounce it, or the giant hyssop, and in some places mentioned sage. And Meg McGrath at Cornell had mentioned on her website that there are some studies that says that now showed that genetically the water mold that causes Basil Downy mildew is not the same as genetically as the one that you find on Coleus. I'm assuming that that's new information that has not been published, because the only thing that I found in my readings in the past year or so had been one that has mentioned that the Basil Downy mildew is genetically different than that was found on sage. So there's quite a bit of information out there in terms of work being done. So the big question is, for us in Texas, is where is it over seasoning? Where is it surviving the winter? Or I guess the bigger question is, does it survive the winter in Texas? Is it in the south of Texas and then moving up north? I don't have an answer for that. The fact that we're seeing it show up here in the winter months in College stations would suggest that it's probably all over. So we have not done much work since 2011 in terms of trying to get a handle of the distribution of this particular pathogen in Texas, unfortunately. Things about disease identification, really more to the growers and to the homeowners out there. Recognizing the symptoms. If you do see that mottling, if you do see that sort of intervenal chlorosis that is somewhat limited by the veins, you will see some of that mottling typically towards the central vein. If you see that, flip the leaf over. Look for the spores. And typically when you see those symptoms up top and it's moist, there's a real good chance that you will actually see the spores or at least some fuzzy underneath. You may need a hand lens to look for those structures. Occasionally, if it's severe enough, then you'll see like the dusty, dark, dirt-looking thing on the back, as I showed you in one of the slides earlier. For some of the growers, I've kind of taught them what I call the moist back on the desk method for sporulation. If you see some plants that show that yellow mottling, but you don't see any fuzzy stuff on the underside, not be a bad thing to pull it and stick it in a bag with a wet paper towel, essentially creating a moist condition, a moist isolated condition, and leave it on your desk. So somewhat warm, room temperature, and more than likely you'll see sporulation in about 24 to 48 hours. So it's a quick, dirty way to try and figure out whether the mottling is due to a fertility issue or to downy mildew. The problem with Basil downy mildew in a greenhouse or nursery situation, once you see it, it is quite difficult to control. The fact of the matter is this particular pathogen can produce quite a bit of spores, and if the condition does exist, a conducive condition for disease development, then it's quite difficult to control. There are some fungicides out there, some materials out there, but most of those materials tend to work best as a preventative. What's being done for it, as far as my understanding, is that the best way to deal with this particular problem is to make sure that you start off with clean seeds. So there's been several labs that I'm aware of that are looking at the ways of testing seeds and doing them well. I believe there's a lab, SDA Labs in Colorado, does seed testing for Piranhaspora. I do believe there are a couple of papers that have been out using genetic methods to detect the pathogen in seeds. There are some fungicide trials that I've come across. Some have been published. I know that there's some work being done up in the Northeast, particularly in Rutgers. And on the next slide is a chart that Dr. Gu put together based on some of the information that was gleaned from different publications in terms of what's available for growers. If you see in terms of the location where it says I or O, it's indoors or outdoors, whether it's greenhouse, can be used in the greenhouse or it's used outdoors. In Texas, we run into two situations. We do have nursery production, and we have greenhouse production. In terms of greenhouse production, much of the greenhouse production is grown real quickly and sold for human consumption, so they are limited in a lot of the conventional chemicals that they can use. And for the most part, the growers would prefer to use what I would say natural or the organic approaches. Just a few things about what has appeared to be successful in Texas. And going back to that greenhouse grower that I worked with, they took the time to essentially, I would say, nuke the greenhouse, basically do a great job of sanitizing it, hyperheating it, and then going back with everything as clean as possible. And also they have incorporated a preventative spray schedule. So once those plants get into that particular greenhouse, they begin utilizing some of the green products. I believe 1 year they were using a cease and a potassium bicarbonate mixture. I believe they have also used actinovate with some success. They do have some, at least 2 different conventional fungicides available to them in case it gets out of hand. So far, they have been able to just get away with using those natural products. They regulate the conditions in the greenhouse quite a bit and monitor it carefully to try and find that balance between humidity in the greenhouse, that the plants would still be happy, but to try and create conditions that are not conducive to the pathogen. The other thing that they do tend to do is to row plants early if they see potential symptoms. Seems to be that they don't want to take the risk of just it becoming established or get up to epidemic levels where the sporangers are produced. So when they do see any sort of symptom, they tend to pull those plants pretty quickly. That has somewhat helped with the production. It is a cost. They have to monitor it quite carefully. I'm not exactly sure what's being done, at least at the nursery level, but in terms of monitoring and removing plants, again, would be a good practice in terms of best management practices. This is incorporated with a preventative spray schedule to try and produce plants that are clean. I think the biggest issue that I would have is the fact that a grower can do a pretty good job in managing it, but if we do have latent infections, once a plant is being sold to a homeowner to plant in their yard, there's really not much is being done on that part. So we may have places where the pathogen can actually grow and reproduce. So there are quite a bit of limitations in what we can do about Basil Downy mildew. We don't have really great chemicals, but we have ways to be able to utilize them smartly to suppress the problem. But when the problem gets on, it makes it a lot tougher to eradicate. So removal of the plant is suggested. The other problem is the plants that are grown by the homeowners and in backyards that may not get the same care that they would at a nursery type situation or greenhouse situation, could serve as potential sites for overwintering or overseasoning, as well as inoculum production. just a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Gu and myself put together a Basil Downy Mildew fact sheet that's available at the AgriLife bookstore. It's EPLP 11. You can head out there. The website is URL is listed at the bottom of the slide, and you should be able to download. It's a free publication that's available. I believe that's it. I'd like to open the floor out to discussion right now and take any questions. Meng, do you need control of the screen again?
No, I don't need control, but from the audience, we have a couple of questions that I would like to, to bring up to you that, to answer those. One is, I think you kind of answered it during your presentation. You said, I had problem with downy mildew in Salvia greggii production in Austin in the late 1990s. We decided the source was a native Salvia fascinaceae growing in the fields around us. Could the source be related to Basil downy mildew?
Excellent question. The answer is no. The downy mildew that occurs on Salvia has been shown to be different than the one that occurs on Basil downy mildew.
Okay. Oh, sorry. The second question is, as I was shopping for new stock plants, most of the growers I visited had the same problem but did not know it. Do you think this could be the case for the Basil downy mildew?
The answer to that is yes. Meng, do you want to share your experience, or should we not share that experience?
My experience. Well, let me share. I'm not gonna name names, but
don't mention names. Yes.
I'm not gonna name names, but I will share with you. I was just visiting a retail nursery, and right after I learned about this Basil downy mildew last year, so I said, just learn about this, and can I take a look at your basil plants? It's in the retail environment. So I just went there, and when I looked at those, it looks like, I said, just bring me some of the bad-looking plants. And sure enough, every one of them look chlorotic, but it's not the chlorotic like the nitrogen deficiency, but it's kind of like interveinal chlorotic. So those yellowing are bound by leaf veins, and I took them back to Dr. Ong, and sure enough, he said that was downy mildew. And then again, I was visiting just doing grocery shopping in the grocery store, and there in those stores they have those basil in aqua. It's in like a milkshake type of container with some water at the bottom. So I pick it up, and of course those are some of leftovers, and there is a good reason that there are leftovers on the shelf. There's still leftovers on the shelf. Every one of them got really like I guess 75% covered with leaves with spots, and when I look closer, that look really like the leaf lesion from Basil downy mildew. Of course, I don't know. I need to buy them and have Dr. Ong to check them out. So I guess this just tells you how widespread it is.
Well, let me address one thing about that. Just to let you guys know, if you get basil that has some of this water mold growing on it and you eat it, it's not going to kill you. As far as I'm aware of, it does not produce toxins. It does not. So it's not detrimental to human health. Some of the reasons why you see this pathogen growing on downy mildew, so assuming that we do manage it real well in a greenhouse situation, that the plants are being used, for culinary purposes to be sold in grocery stores. A lot of times the chemical I use are probably natural type products, so residual is not great. So the symptoms may be suppressed, but once it's on the shelf in a situation where there may be some humidity, whether the product is in a bag, so you create the humidity and you may have the symptoms showing up in several days. You know, it does make the product not sellable, but at the same time, if you accidentally eat it, it's not going to kill you.
Kevin, the next question is from Ron. Would you recommend a prophylactic treatment of seeds with fungicide prior to planting?
Again, an excellent question about seed treatment. I don't know how much work has been done with that. At this point, there's no seed treatment that I'm aware of that's being used with basil seeds. So I can't comment much about that. I will say this much about trying to put a fungicide on as a seedling comes up. I kind of flip-flop on that in the sense that some people say, you know, that's really what you want to do to make sure your plant stays clean all the way. But I tend to go on the fact that if you start off with clean plants, you should have clean plants to a point where it comes into contact with the pathogen, which you may have several weeks as that seedling grows. And if the pathogen is present, there is that possibility for latent infection. You know, I don't know much about that. Thankfully, on this thing, we do have Dr. McGrath and Cornell on, so I hope that she can help comment on some of this session. But one thing I'm glad she's on to, because I think she's quite up to date with things that are going on in terms of research with and studies with the Basil Downy Mildew. So if she's willing to comment on some of it, I think it will be great information for all of us.
She's unmuted.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Hey,
you.
Mag.
Hi.
Well, thank you for participating in this, and please comment.
Yeah, no problem. I was eager to hear the update from what was happening in your neck of the woods. I'm in New York, and where I am, we're feeling that wind-dispersed spores are our primary source. There are some states that have allowance of using some of the Ridamil subdue type fungicides. California, for Arizona, and I believe the state that allows it, and that's for growing plants primarily for sale to consumers, home gardeners situation. There is one seed company that now has a destructive test. I think that's, if I recall correctly, STA in Colorado will now do testing. There's been some work done looking at steam treatment, and that's just starting to be looked at, because you can't hot water treat the seed. You end up with a gel that comes out that makes it a little bit messy. But certainly where I am in the East Coast, wind-dispersed spores are what is dominating our source of inoculum. I have seen the disease every year since 2008, both in my research and more importantly in my small garden, backyard garden, which tells me there's a lot of inoculum out there.
Okay, next question. Dr. McGrath, okay, go ahead.
Just before that, that is a conclusion that we come to here too, is that there is just a source out there. I don't know exactly where it is. It's probably in a whole bunch of backyards where, you know, we got volunteer plants that are hosts for it, and so the wind-blown spores is more than likely the main inoculum that we find affecting basil in Texas.
Okay, a question to both of you, I guess. This is from Brian. Are any seed companies offering pre-tested lots of Downy mildew-free basil seeds?
Meg?
I
Aware of any?
I don't know if anyone is. That's certainly a good question to ask.
Okay, I guess we'll ask around.
I am not aware of any, but yeah, but that might, but I'll be, it's not unlikely that there will be some seed companies that are doing this to just make sure their seed lots are clean.
Okay, the next question is asked about the URL of the printed material that we meant that Dr. Ong mentioned. So hopefully I've already put that in the a message to all. The next question is, will this Basil Downy Mildew only get to sweet basil or any type of basil? That's a great question.
That was actually addressed in the fact sheet that Dr. Gu and myself put together. We do find that there is differences in the cultivars, how they respond to the infection. Sweet basils are primarily what gets hit the most. What we do find is the Genovese. What else is there? Then there are a few which are not as susceptible, and this was work done at Rutgers. There's a published paper on it. But before even this paper came out, the growers, we had some growers here that noticed that it was hitting hard on the Italian basils, but not as much on the Thai basil. So there are some differences in the type of cultivars. Go pick up that fact sheet and also look up that reference of that paper that Andy Washnath and actually Meg McGrath is also an author on that paper that was published in 2010.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Ong. To both of you, how widespread is the problem throughout the country?
Meg, that's yours.
I think it is very widespread. I've got a monitoring program that I've kept going on the web. I think there's a lot of places that haven't yet reported, don't realize it's there, don't realize to report. Mm-hmm. But I get reports from all over. It's now in Hawaii, thought to be in Alaska as well.
Oh my.
Seed has gotten it to a lot of areas. And then I think once there it gets established.
I think the last time I counted, there are over 30 states. Started in Florida, and then now they're like over 30 states. Am I right on that?
Yeah, I haven't counted recently, but I think at least 30 states.
At least 30 states. Okay, including the great state of Texas.
My guess is it is really widespread, and over the last 2 years, I will have to apologize to Mag that we haven't kept up with the reporting because we don't see as many samples come into the clinic, although we hear quite a bit about it, and I think a number of folks are self-diagnosing and not reporting. So a call can go out to those of you who are in Texas. If you do come across it, particularly on a basil relative or a coleus or even on a hyssop plant that you might find in the landscape, if you see potential symptoms, shoot me an email and also a picture, and I might send in a sample and we'll try and get that recorded.
Do we,
if anybody's on the line from other than Texas, those websites are all still active. You can find them at I've got a posting at Vegetable MD online. You can add to past reports from other states, other years, if you'd like. That would be really helpful.
Okay. I think, Meng, if we can get that I do believe I have that URL, and we'll try and post it somewhere for the folks.
Meg, I think actually you could post the URL here. At the bottom, there's a chat box. You can send it to all.
Okay.
Yeah. You see where the chat box is?
Yes.
Okay. So can you copy and paste your URL here?
I will bring it right up.
Okay. Great.
Thanks.
Well, at the meantime, if you'll have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to text it in the chat box or email me. Oh,
There we go.
okay. We have an additional question. Are you considering any 24C requests? That's from Raymond.
At this point, no. I do believe we had a Section 18 a couple of years ago, well, 3 years ago, I think now, for Raymond and Revis, Ranman and Revis, but that I think is on the label now. As far as I know, there is nothing that's coming out of Texas. Although I believe a couple of those products that actually had an emergency Section 18 is available to Texas, but I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, Randman should be. Revis is supposed to be registered very soon.
Okay.
Okay, I guess that's it. Yeah, I think that's the last question from last question was from Raymond. I think that's it, and I really appreciate you all, and especially Meg. Thank you for participating in this
Yes.
and contribute. I really appreciate it. It's about almost an hour now, and we'll just conclude this webinar, and you'll have a great afternoon.
Thank you.